Hi, we're Brittany and Karah, your trauma-informed besties, here to illuminate a pathway of healing and empowerment for moms ready to live a life at their fullest potential. We've got the real talk from abuse to neglect to hardships of parenting, because you are not alone on your healing journey. And together, we can step out of the darkness and into the light because we are resilient moms.
Hello, Karah.
Hi, Brittany.
Welcome back. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on today's episode of Resilient Moms. I had to steal this intro from Karah because it is a topic that she has been bringing up, I think, since day one of wanting to start this podcast. And because of that, I just need to jump in with you want to talk about no contact with family members, parents, people who essentially do not serve us and what we want in our lives. But what do you mean when you say no contact? Because I feel like that definition in and of itself could be construed. Thank you. Is it 100% we don't speak? Do I see you on holidays? Do you get to see my kids? It is a loaded term. So can you just kind of what is no contact for you?
No contact for me is, I think it's different each day.
Tell me more.
So no, and I think it also changes based on certain conversations. So for a massive period of time, I was no contact with my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get messages from her on Facebook, pretty much saying, "Oh my gosh, your son is getting so big. I missed my grandson. He never comes around to see me anymore. Why don't you ever come around to see me anymore?" And these messages were never, "Hey, how are you doing? Wow, you look great. Jackson is getting so big." They were more on the negative side. Mm-hmm. When they landed, right? Her intent may not have been
right
to be negative, but the impact was extremely negative on my end. And the reason why I had felt that way for so long is because anytime I had tried to talk to her about my experiences, whether that have been my sexual abuse or experiences, just in life, I felt like a few weeks later, she would pretend, or maybe she would genuinely forget that we didn't have that conversation, or, "Oh, I didn't know that." And so I kind of just kept feeling like I was getting gaslit.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually changed between us within just the last couple months. And I was really frustrated because it had happened over and over again. I mean, she would say something, sometimes I would ignore it and pretend like it didn't happen. I'd call her out on it and tell her how I was feeling. And, but the situation had never changed. I was constantly getting these messages, and anytime she'd call, especially anybody who's listening who has a negative relationship with any of their family members, you get that phone call from somebody and your heart starts racing. You get anxiety. You dread the conversation that's supposed to happen. Oh, right? I never wanted to feel that way with my grandmother. And so she had really pissed me off one day. And I sat on it for a few days because I didn't want to respond out of anger. But I also knew that the conversation that I was going to have with her needed to happen in person. So I decided to show up at her house one day. Mm-hmm. And we sat and talked for 4 hours. And I wasn't expecting it to go as well as it did, to be honest with you. I really thought that it was going to be a continuation of gaslighting. Mm-hmm. But she sat and she listened. And she was listening to understand, not just listening to respond. And so that's just one example of a no contact situation.
It's fluid.
It is fluid.
It's fluid.
Mm-hmm. This one that situation ended up really, really great. And so continuous from there, she has been extremely supportive on my journey. She'll call me. She's in tune. And I think, for her too, hearing that I'm on this journey not for revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she had a preconceived notion that, so because my brother lives with her, I think she thought that I was afraid to go to her house, afraid to see her, or maybe I was angry with her because he lived there.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I look at the two situations very different. They're two different situations.
Yeah.
I obviously have no contact with my brother.
Right.
But that also just happened.
New.
That is very new. And I think I struggle with it though still because I have not expressed to him why we're no contact. Obviously, he sexually abused me for many years, and our audience would probably say, well, he should know why.
Right,
No
but it was...
But for the last, let's call it 31 years, we were always contact.
Mm-hmm.
Even when he was in jail, when he came out, he officiated my wedding.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were always contact. So all of a sudden one day I stopped. And I stopped because I went, why am I continuing to have this person in my life who has abused me
Mm-hmm.
just because they're my family? If it was anybody else, would I have still stayed in contact with this person for all these years?
Can I tell you something? That question I had asked myself from the moment you and I became friends, and I had no idea how to ask you.
As a friend.
As a friend.
Yes, as a friend, as an advocate, any of our listeners, it's okay to ask the hard questions. If you ask the hard questions, I think a lot of times we feel seen. Because even if you would have asked me, I probably would have said, I don't know.
Right.
I would not have responded in anger for you calling it out.
Mm-hmm.
It would have probably gotten me to think about things a lot sooner.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend, if you ever get that, have a dying question you need to ask a friend or a family member, and you're nervous at how they're going to respond, just ask.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I did. I finally decided to go no contact with my brother, and I did it. I saw him recently. The day I was at my grandma's, I was getting ready to say goodbye to her, and he walked outside. And I think I've said this, I have no anger toward my brother.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not vengeful. I wish him all the best. And I hadn't seen him in about 2 years, and he walked outside, and we didn't say anything, but we both waved and we smiled, and that was it. Cordial. So my thought in my healing that he still probably wonders maybe why we've gone no contact. I bet that hurts him. And from a person like myself who can see both sides of the abuser and the victim, which I think is it's an interesting perspective to be able to see both sides. I know he's probably hurting.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to provide a reasoning for him. I'm just not there yet.
Yeah. When you're ready.
When I'm ready. Yes. So, but it's my understanding he knows the journey that I'm on. He knows that I'm writing a book, so he has to have
ideas. Yeah.
Ideas and an understanding. And I think that gives me a sense of calm.
Mm-hmm.
But because for my own morals, my own ethics, because I have not verbalized it or written it or, sent him a letter or anything like that, because I have not given him that reason myself, I struggle with that. I feel like I've ghosted my brother.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to know what? My therapist says, he's not your problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your problem to know how he feels, but as a human, and again, somebody who sees both sides, I do struggle with that. So I think my biggest thing, and I'll reiterate the rhetorical question that I said earlier, is why do we continue to put up with bad behavior or abuse or gaslighting or narcissism, whatever your experience is? Why do we put up with that from our family when we would never put up with that from our friends or acquaintances? Why is it that just because they're blood, we are held to a standard that we can't set boundaries or remove them from our life because they're blood? And I think that our generation is becoming much more in tune with it is okay to walk away for our health, for our healing, for our children. And I still think it's a really important topic that we should talk about.
And it's interesting hearing you say this and your experience with no contact in your family members, because for me, like when you brought this up, I'm like, okay, yeah, let's talk about it. But I didn't realize, like, I hold firm boundaries with my family and I have very limited contact and never thought twice about it.
Why do you think that is? Because I know that was not taught to you.
I think that after my mom died from her drug overdose, that I needed to get away. And so I had the choice. Do I go away to college or do I stay home and live with my grandmother? Who my grandmother took us in, was great. Like, she did a lot for us. But once I got out, I realized how negative and toxic that house was. And I started realizing how close my friends were, like from high school. I went away to college and we were still very, very close. And I felt like I grew my own family. So I started living my life by the saying, like, just because they're blood does not mean anything.
Correct.
Were you waiting for me to say that?
Like, I love it.
Like you had heard it before?
I mean, either between that or we get to choose who our villages.
Yes.
And I'm trying to teach this with my son too, is that you get to decide who your friends are.
Yeah.
But then you also get to decide who your family is.
You do.
And I don't want him to ever think that the blood in your family that's your family and nobody else, because you're my family. My son calls you Aunt Brittany. You are his family. You are his village. And I think that's so important to teach our children, that it's okay at any point if you feel that your family isn't your village anymore.
Yeah.
You can make your own village.
And you can change the dynamics in your family. So like my kids growing up, like they don't have a grandmother, right? And like I would say a lot of their grandparents are MIA, we'll say. But for sure, like, does not have a grandmother. So my aunt is their grandmother. Like, my kids are not missing out because of my parents' choices. I have just chosen other people to fill those spots.
Yes. And I think that is so important to note, because I've done the same thing. We haven't gotten to my no contact with my mother yet. We'll get there. And we also haven't talked about even my husband's side.
I'm trying to think of who I talk to in my family.
Yeah.
Like, really?
You really don't.
I don't. And I don't think I realized it until this conversation.
So the other thing that you don't have to answer today if you don't want to, but you need to sit back and say, are you happy with the gaps that you filled, and are all of your gaps filled?
Yes, that is.
Because for me, I am filled by the gaps. I am incredibly blessed by my mother-in-law and her mother. And even though how do I even explain this? Okay, so my mother-in-law and my husband's father got divorced when my husband was very young. And my husband's father is pretty much non-existent. There's very low contact with them. And my mother-in-law got remarried to Pappy. And they're now divorced. They've been divorced since before my son was even born.
Mm-hmm.
He did not have to stick around. He did not have to be a grandparent to my child.
Mm-hmm.
There's no blood relation there.
Right.
He made a choice, and he is the most consistent grandparent. Between him and my mother-in-law,
Mm-hmm.
they show up. My sister-in-law shows up. My brother-in-law shows up. My grandmother-in-law,
Mm-hmm.
they show up.
Mm-hmm.
And they have shown up nonstop since Jackson was born. And we have built this community. I spend more time with them than I do my own friends.
Mm-hmm.
And they have filled my holes.
Yeah.
They are my parents. They are my family. And it's been really nice to watch my grandmother come back into the fold. She and my grandmother-in-law are, they get along very well. So it's nice to see them, start to find that friendship. And, I will say I've noticed my father, who I've been like in that low contact, no contact journey with for a really long time. In his older age, even though he still has his own problems, he's on his own healing journey right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I have come to accept the way he shows up for me in his own way. I am constantly, saddened because I remember before I even got pregnant, he used to say, come on, Care Bear, I want to have a grandbaby before I'm 60. And I used to think he was going to be so present.
Yeah.
And after I had my son, he just wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And he never really has been present. And he doesn't really show up. But Jackson's not missing that. He has his holes filled, right? I have found that even on my journey through healing and speaking out about my sexual abuse, he's been calling me more.
Okay.
Which has been really nice. I don't have any expectations for that relationship.
Yeah.
But when he calls, we'll sit and talk for an hour. And he'll talk to me about himself. He'll ask me about me. And so I've started to just allow him to show up as he is.
Yeah.
And that's been okay. That's been enough.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have all my other holes filled, there isn't an expectation. And I think that as humans who are going on this journey of no contact, low contact with their family members or parents, it's okay to allow them to show up as they are.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what I did with like my grandmother. And I don't even think I realized that we were low contact. And I'm trying to like pinpoint when that started. And I do think it was during college when I left. She called me almost every day complaining about my sisters.
Oh, wow.
And
that's hard. That's hard to hear.
So negative, like, so I would try to convince her. I'm like, well, you have to, be firm to your boundaries. Tell them they can't go out. Tell them they can't do this. But she would let them walk all over her. And it got to the point, that's when I started therapy. That was the first time I started therapy, was in college. And I learned I can't control everyone.
Yes.
And so I thought, if she does not want to listen to any advice I give her in relation to them, then I don't want to hear it anymore.
Yes.
And so once I stopped giving advice and I started responding with, yeah, okay, that sucks, and not giving in, she stopped calling. So it was never like, yeah, I'm going to stop contact with her. It was, I can't do this anymore. And so she has done a lot for me. And so I will continue to listen, and I will just not respond. And by not responding, she no longer was fueling the fire, and that is what she wanted.
You were no longer fueling the fire.
Yes, there was no fire for her to fuel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she made the decision to
Well, she's not
no
giving me
contact.
what I need, so I'm going to
Exactly.
go talk to someone else.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so she made the decision to go no contact, and you just continued that because she was not giving you anything that you need. There was
Yeah.
no value in that relationship anymore. And I think the other thing that is so important for us and our listeners to know is if people are not providing you a value in your life, if you have coworkers or friends or acquaintances who give you no value in your life, are you going to keep them around? Probably not.
No.
So why would you do it with your family?
Right.
Why are you going to put that time and effort and energy? We have so much more that we have to spend our time on, right? Our day-to-day living, jobs, the economy, right? Everything that's happening in the world, our faith. Why are we going to put that time, effort, and energy into family members who provide us no value?
And have you heard the phrase, you are the 5 people you hang around?
I have heard the phrase, there's 2 different that I've heard. So tell me if I'm thinking about this the same way. My mother used to say, birds of a feather flock together, or the people you surround yourself with are generally who you turn into.
Yes.
So that's okay.
That. Yes. Same concept, same idea. And like, that is also why I left for college, because I could not turn into my family. Granted, through therapy, I've like always swung the pendulum the whole opposite way. And so now I'm working on that, but in a way that's easier to work on than had I ended up like them. Like, there is no getting through to my grandmother. There is not. And she doesn't have any recollection of how toxic she is to anyone. So it is not my job to try to be the mirror for her.
You can't heal her.
I cannot. I cannot. And like, she's actually someone I think everyone should see a therapist. She's one that I don't even think it would work, because in therapy, you really do look at like a lot of perspectives. She does not have other perspectives. Like, when I don't think I realized until recently that she actually is a narcissist. And so that is what I had grown up with. And so low contact for my children as well. Like, they have to be around me if they are around her. She will see them occasionally if it's been a while, or holidays. But the way she speaks to people, and even like my niece and nephew, I will never have that around my children.
I love that you say that. Okay, so I want to touch a piece on around your children. Okay, and when I was going through this really deep conversation with my grandmother, it wasn't just about me; it was about my son. And so I love that you bring that up. First of all, let's stop generational trauma.
Yeah.
But she and I were sitting down, and I had remembered last Christmas when we were getting ready to go to my grandmother's to exchange gifts. And this was still at a time where things were not very good, right? Nobody was really excited to go over there. And I remember my son saying to me, "Mom, why do we have to go to grandma's? I don't want to go. She always hugs me too tightly." He was very much expressing that he does not like it when she enters his bubble. Also, they don't really have a relationship. And I kick myself in the butt for what I had said, but I'll repeat what I said, even though I've now retracted it with him and with her too. I remember saying, "You know how grandma is. Just say hi. She misses you. Give her a hug. Tell her hello. Give her the attention she needs, and then she'll let you kind of go away."
Yeah.
And I did say, if she says, "Oh, I haven't seen you in so long. I miss you so much," you can say to her, "Grandma, I just saw you for my birthday. You can remind her when she's seen you. But of course, I kicked myself in the butt because I told him, she's family.
Yes.
You can let her
make you
her
uncomfortable.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's not okay. So when she and I had this conversation, I reset expectations with her. And I told her, I said, listen, he is uncomfortable with you. He doesn't know you very well. He's 9 years old. The last time you guys had a strong relationship, he was an infant. I said, so you need to, if you want to be a part of his life, one, you need to show up. My son recognizes the people in his life who show up for him. And showing up for him is incredibly important, not only for him, but very important for me. If you don't show up for my kid, you don't really get access to him. And so I told her, I said, you need to rebuild that relationship. And getting into his space and hugging him and squeezing his cheeks and kissing him and like being like kind of like a bear, jumping on him. I said, you're going to push him away 10 times more. I said, you don't hug him. You don't touch him unless he comes to you. You can expect that he will not even acknowledge your presence. And that's okay. I am not going to force him to say hello. You can allow him to come to you on his own time. I'm not forcing a relationship. That is something that you have to work for. And he also has to put in the work to work on. And she accepted that. As hard as it is, she accepted that. And when I tell you, I was so surprised. Like I said, she was listening to understand and she wanted to work on everything. I think that's what made me so safe in being able to tell her all these really ugly things that are hard to talk about. And so I had gone home that day and apologized to my son. I reminded him of Christmas and I apologized. I said, I never want anybody to make you feel uncomfortable. And you can even tell me no. Don't ever enter somebody's space. If you're uncomfortable, you do not have to hug anybody you don't want to. You don't have to say hello to anybody you don't want to. Whenever you're ready to leave somewhere, I won't even ask questions. If you're uncomfortable, we will leave. And he accepted that. He thanked me. And we continued to go on about our day. He saw her a week later and he did not hug her. He did say hello. And as we were leaving that day, she reverted back to her old ways. And she was like, come on, hug me goodbye. And she kind of grabbed his cheeks. And I looked at her and I said, absolutely not. You will not touch my son unless he is the one who comes for it. So as mothers, right, we have to be our children's advocate. We set a boundary. They won't always be able to hold it because they're small. We need to keep our kids safe. And so she, it's going to be a constant reminder for both of them. I have trained my son for 9 years to go hug this person, go say hello. That's how I was raised. This person gave you a present, go give them a hug and say thank you.
But who are these people to them but strangers?
Exactly. So I don't want my son to be raised like that anymore. I will not raise him the way that I was raised.
And there's always time to change. Like you shifted at 9 and he understands you can have those honest conversations with him, which is beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. Because it, as emotional as it was for me.
Right. Because you're in between two generations trying to manage
expectations. But his healing is so much more important to me than hers and even mine, I think sometimes. That I wanted him to know that it's okay. The last person that I have gone no contact with, and I'll say no contact except, is my mother. The exception is a few things. She will send Christmas gifts or birthday gifts. I will reach out and say thank you. I'm not a horrible human. I can thank somebody for their gifts. I call and say thank you. Sometimes it's gotten to the point where I just text and say thank you.
So now, when did that start? Because that's another question I never asked you. Was I understood she was your mother, but you guys talked a lot, and you were, I don't think there was a single conversation that you ever left happy.
Never.
And so I never asked, like, why do you talk to her?
Because she was my mother.
But I've always, because I still believed at that time, like, family is who you make it. And I wondered, why did you talk to her?
And I did not believe that at that time. So my mother and I have gone through the wave of no contact. It's either been no contact or we talk and pretend everything is okay. And the past is the past, and you don't revisit the past, and kind of like live from now forward. And I realize now how unhealthy that is. That's both of them are very unhealthy relationships. I would say from the age of 16 to now, it has been either no contact or pretend. And there have been a few key moments that were red flags for me where I went, this is not the type of person that I want to have in my life. But it wasn't until, within the last year or two where I went, I wouldn't put up with this from a friend. Why would I put up with this with a family member? So I remember one key moment was my son was probably 2 years old, and I was very much in the contact with my mother, but pretending like everything is okay stage. And I applied to work at a position at her job, which would have made us relocate to Florida. And I was actually really excited about it. So I applied. I talked to, my now husband, and he said, if this is really what you want, we'll move to Florida. He's always been like that, very supportive of my decisions. Whatever you think is best, like, I'm here. I'll be right behind you. I would have been
less supportive, just so you know.
I know you would have. I remember when we told my mother-in-law, she was hysterical. Yeah. She was very, very upset. And so I had gotten an interview for the position. The interview went fantastic. I did another one, went fantastic. They invited me down to Florida to do an in-person interview. And I said, okay, well, this is a good time for the three of us to go down there and look at certain areas of Florida that we would want to live, just in case, so we can prep.
Yeah.
Have the most information, like look at some houses or apartments that we like, and then check out the areas. Where are the schools? Things of that nature. And so I had called my mother and told her I was very excited. And I said, okay, well, I have the interview on Friday. We're going to come for the weekend. We're going to check out some homes, etc. And verbatim, her response was, well, they don't need to come with you. I know all the best places in Florida. I know exactly where you can go. And besides, I'm celebrating that I graduated my master's this weekend. And so since you were coming, I was hoping I could just do it with my girls. I can't make this up. I went, I'm going to be uprooting my family to come and live in Florida. It is important for me and my now husband and my son to visit these locations ourselves and make our own decisions. She got very angry with me. And, reiterated that she knows everything and she knows all the best places. And this is supposed to be her weekend. Well, if I'm uprooting my life, it has nothing to do with you. Right then and there, I said, you want to know what? This is not meant to be. I am not coming to Florida. I canceled my flight and I reached out to the people I was supposed to interview with, and I withdrew my application. And from there, I went no contact for a while. If I'm going to leave Michigan with this massive support system that I have to go live in Florida, the expectation is that I'll have a massive support system.
Right.
If you can't support my family coming down to look at homes or areas where, my son would now grow up and it's all about you, that's not okay for me.
Yeah.
Many of our conversations led with anger, arguments, and I think that it took me a long time to figure out that that was not what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
There were many times, I think for me, the biggest problem is not just the little moments. It's really diving down and sitting down and talking about my sexual abuse. Like that would be the biggest start for
Mm-hmm.
me. I would just want her to listen to understand where I'm coming from. Maybe answer questions that I have. But really, at the end of the day, I just want her to listen to how I'm feeling, how I've felt all these years. And anytime I bring that up, it turns into an argument. Can't you just forgive? I dealt with this already in therapy. Why do we have to bring this up again? And so, getting hit with that roadblock, and it's not just the sexual abuse side, it's everything else. It's maybe I had an issue with the way that she spoke to me, and I get, that type of response back. So I said, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. The biggest time that it hit me, she came to visit, and she stayed with us for a few days. And she and I went out to dinner with my husband and my son. They decided to drive separate. We ended up having a great night. We get in the car. I wanted to talk about my brother again because she kept talking about what was happening in his life. And at the time, I wasn't ready to hear about it. I had no interest in even hearing my brother's name. That was a struggle for me. And I had requested, I said, please don't talk to me about how he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
I have no problems that you talk to him. That I'm not going to tell you to stop talking to your son. I just don't want to hear about it. Because I want her to hear me.
Yeah.
And it got blown out of proportion. We ended up stopping the car. We're screaming at each other in the parking lot. I was so angry that I started pushing and shoving her. I remember being so angry that I probably would have punched her in the face. And she pushes and shoves back and she screams and she's, and the thing is that she knows that my anger comes from sadness. She knows this. She is such a high intelligent woman, and she is very aware of feelings and how I feel and how anger can come across as other emotions. I think that's what pisses me off more, is because she knows all of this, but then she won't have the conversation. She knows that my anger is sadness or disappointment. She knows that it's not actually anger, but then she doesn't want to take that next step to dive into how we got there. And after that moment, and I literally told her, I said, you can find a hotel to sleep in. I got home before her and I put all of her crap out on my patio and I locked the door and she was not allowed back in my house. And any time this type of altercation would happen, it would ruin me. As daughters, we want to have that emotional connection, that safe feeling from their parent, that warm embrace, that smile, that joy, that happiness. And I was constantly searching for that. You want to share the ups and downs with your parent. You want to, if you fall down and skid your knee, you want them to pick you up and hold you and make sure that you're safe. I don't have that. I've never had that, especially as an adult. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I realized if we don't have that mother-daughter type relationship, I don't need that type of toxicity in my life. If I wouldn't allow it in a stranger or a friend, I will not allow it with my mother. And so she is the biggest one that's no contact for me.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So as we're thinking about understanding that we are the 5 people that we hang around. And if that does end up being our family that are putting us in these toxic relationships, what is one of the first steps you can take to starting this process?
I think acknowledging the first step, I think, is acknowledging, taking a step back and looking at everybody from a bird's eye view and looking at the areas where looking at your family is not your family, but friends or acquaintances. Asking yourself, would I allow this person to treat me this way if they were not my blood? Right? And write that down. Make note of it. Start making little acknowledgments like that. But before cutting off communication altogether, I think it's important for, like what I did with my grandmother, see if you can have those conversations where they listen to understand. I think that is so key. If you don't have somebody who's listening to understand, they're not in the mindset to pretty much ever get to that point with you. And so that's, another check mark. Okay, maybe that's not somebody who I would want in my life. And I think that is a big step right there. Look at the people that you're surrounded with. Look at, are you just putting up with their behavior, or is this somebody that you feel are safe and supported by? And it's a two-way street. You're not just supporting them, they're supporting you too. Look at people who, are you putting in all of the effort for the relationship? Are you the only one who are making phone calls? Are you the one who's pretty much that bridge to the relationship? If so, that's another problem too. That's a red flag. And so just pausing and recognizing is the first step.
I love that. Acknowledging for sure. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all your stories today.
Yes, thank you. I think it was really good. I think the conversation and the topic of no contact, low contact is continuously evolving. And we could dive down, a deeper hole and dive into the narcissistic side or just the abuse side and or mental health with our parents or a drug or alcohol abuse too. A lot of it will stem towards this no contact, low contact.
Yeah.
And for our audience's health, I think just pausing and acknowledging it is okay to go no contact or low contact for yourself, for your healing, for your children, for your spouse, and then taking it from there.
Yeah, you have permission.
Yes.
And you need to give yourself that permission.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we will see you next week. Looking forward to it. Thanksgiving is right around the corner.
Coming up so fast.
So excited. We're going to have an episode on gratitude. So we will see you next week. Have a great day, Resilient Moms.